Chapter 28, verses 501 through 583. 501. And if you look at and consider your life, your activity, and your fellow human beings, the nature and its life forms as well as the whole world, then you find only little that is really worthy of a true humankind, because you have destroyed everything, your honor and dignity, your true being human, your life in accordance with the creational laws and recommendations, your forests, grasslands, wetlands, meadows, your creeks, rivers, streams, lakes, and seas, as well as your climate, just as you have exterminated many animals, birds, fishes, and all sorts of creatures, and continue to do so through your unintellect and irrationality, and your continued cultivation of the all-destroying overpopulation. 502. Truly, you are like unusable servants in a paradisiacal garden in which you destroy and eliminate everything, instead of taking care of it, building it up, and bringing it to the blossoming and bearing of good fruits. 503. You waste your lifetime with vanity, egoism, hatred, jealousy, unpeace, unfreedom, and disharmony, with strife, war, lying and deception, as well as with murder, manslaughter, torture, punishment, destruction, and extermination, but also with senseless gambling, thereby adorning your high ability, which lies in you as a creational gift, with cheap bric-a-brac, with wrong wishes, hopes, and desires of all kinds. 504. Wake up, you human beings of Earth, so that you can create for yourselves a worthy consciousness evolution and no longer go through life desperately poor with regard to your truth knowledge. Create for yourselves, through the finding and following of the truth of all truth, an inexhaustible treasure during your earthly life, so that you are in yourselves like king and emperor and reign over your existence with the scepter of the true love, the knowledge, and the wisdom. 505. Do not remain desperately poor in your truth knowledge, and do not think that the material knowledge alone is sufficient to further the evolution of your consciousness. Because if you think in this wise, then you are unworthy of the life and are king and emperor of your own inner darkness and unknowledge. So you childishly wield a scepter of the dalliance and illusion, and put on a crown of the arrogance and vanity, and therewith prove your lack of intelligence. 506. What you necessarily have to research is, first and foremost, only all that which you need for the recognition of the truth in yourselves and for the evolutive climb up of your consciousness, in which case you need the movement of the learning, which is of most important significance for the furtherance of your truth finding and consciousness evolution. 507. In everything that you go about, do, and undertake, you must ask yourselves what advantage and value the whole brings for you yourselves as well as for your fellow human beings. 508. And it is necessary that you recognize your destination and fully adhere to it, so that you comprehend that you have to follow and fulfill it in your life. 509. Truly, if you fulfill a great action on your world, then you will be honored, provided that you are not envied for it. Such glory usually stays with you till your earthly end, and often even beyond it over decades, centuries, or even millennia. But that is a pure human work of the remembrance, and often even of the glorification, and indeed not seldom with regard to a wrong understanding of the fact that human beings in their actions and their activity shall not be glorified, but only kept in honorable remembrance and be thought of in dignity, where through no glorification and no person or human cult shall be practiced. 510. A glorification of human beings, gods and 10 gods, is just as perverse as a glorification of the creation universal consciousness, which indeed represents in its entire being a magnificence, but shall not be glorified nevertheless. Used in connection with the creation universal consciousness, the term magnificence does not mean glorification, but grace, beauty, true love, fairness, and attraction, whereas glorification means worship, servitude, humility, cheering, and adulation. 511. Glorification is the fruit of your wrong human view, your wrong assessment, and erroneous evaluation of the reality, which you have made into a tradition and transferred to all and everything that you deem to be higher than yourselves. 512. Your circling motion is extremely sluggish, which is why the interactions are only triggered slowly and not with easiness, so they generally only ensue step by step and no longer let you recognize the causes that lead to the interaction from which you very often have to suffer because they are of a negative, bad, and evil nature. 513. The interactions which arise out of your motions of your thoughts and feelings, as well as out of your actions, deeds, and out of your entire activity, are always measured according to their viewpoints. Through your human view, you let so many thoughts, feelings, actions, deeds, and many activities appear great, even though they are truthfully insignificant and worthless, whereas you do not value so many other things, in which truthful greatness inheres, in their good and great excellence. 514. The higher you develop the consciousness-based evolution, the easier and clearer your understanding and the quicker your reward of the knowledge and the wisdom will be, because your human consciousness rises faster and faster in its evolution, if you consciously have a good volition thereto. And if this good volition is given in you, then even a single small and really good action pulls you in that moment upwards into the highest inner heights of the joy, peace, freedom, and harmony. And you can make use thereof in remembrance, out of which it follows that you climb higher and higher, and that you acquire new knowledge and new wisdom, together with in you growing true love to yourselves, to your fellow human beings, to the life, to the creation universal consciousness, and to all its created creations, laws and recommendations, and to everything existing in every form. 515. And if you reach this state, then you can no longer remain in stagnation, because you make an effort in a conscious, willing, and incessant wise to follow the motion of the consciousness evolution in order to rise continuously higher in it. However, if you stand still in the ripening of your consciousness, then the ripeness will begin to rot, because it is not supplied with new energy and power. Instead, these are used up again, and therethrough a decay process is triggered. 516. If you human beings of Earth see yourselves in the true reason of your existence, then you are equal to a fruit of the creation universal consciousness, which you yourselves must bring to the ripening in your consciousness evolution, just like a fruit on a tree for which the tree is the creational existence, although the fruit must nevertheless bring itself to the ripeness. 517. Consider, however, that as fruit of the creation universal consciousness, you are not the creation universal consciousness itself, but always remain its fruit, but you carry the capability in you to develop yourselves to the ripening of your consciousness evolution, in order to therewith enrich the tiny part of the creation in you, i.e. your spirit, and this spirit in turn enriches the creation itself. But still you are not the creation itself. 518. Your consciousness evolution is the sense of your existence, and this sense is integrated into the automatic impulsion and course of the universal laws of the creation, through which you are given the capability to be evolutively active in your consciousness yourselves in order to fulfill the sense and therewith the mission of your life. 519. Truly, despite the automatic impulsion to the fulfillment of the life sense as it is given through the laws of the creation, you human beings are nevertheless free in your will, actions, deeds, activity, determining and deciding. So the laws of the creation do not impose any coercion on you. 520. In this freedom of your will, you are not only given the determining and deciding with regard to your consciousness evolution, but also the motion of your procreation, which you shall, however, only use for the preservation of your species and not for the excessive population growth, because it is also your task to protect, preserve, and further your earth and its nature and climate, as well as all animals and other creatures, not, however, to destroy them, as you are doing through the vermin-like cultivation of your humankind. 521. Truly, as human beings of Earth, you have to fulfill a great task with regard to your consciousness evolution and your world and its nature, climate, and all animals, creatures. And no, there is nothing in the creation universal consciousness which would be integrated into a task without motion and would not be integrated into the creation-given laws and recommendations. So even in the putrefaction there is motion, furtherance, and benefit, because therethrough, through the passing, new things emerge again. 522. Therefore, be heedful in all things and be conscious that you also hold yourselves in the height attained, once you have climbed up in your consciousness evolution. You must not take a rest and not allow any thoughts and feelings to arise of you having done enough for some time, but instead you must continuously move on like the hovering falcon in the air, which in doing so saves itself from the fall and at the same time looks out for new food. 523. Truly, in everything lies simple creational laws and recommendations, in the fine fluidal and in the high fine fluidal spiritual, as well as in the most coarse material. And indeed, these laws and recommendations cannot be changed or bent. They act and must be paid attention to, and indeed both in the thin shining of the fine and high fine fluidal, in which the acting is lighter and faster, and in the inert and coarse substantial, in which it is correspondingly slower, but in either case they are in constant motion, and indeed it is so. 524. There is such a simplicity given in the effects and outcoming effects of the creational laws and recommendations themselves that no special education is required to find it, to correctly recognize it, and to comprehend it, because only a healthy intellect and a clear rationality suffice thereto. 525. Each of you human beings of Earth has a creationally given capability thereto, if only you want to set it consciously in motion and perceive it and use it. And truly, every perception is very easy, if you consciously, heedfully, and attentively observe, because you only make it heavy for yourselves through your knowledge conceit, i.e. through your imagined knowledge superiority, as a result of which you like to form in an overly boastful wise the simplest thing in academic and abstract terms, in words in order to shine and to appear brilliant, and to boast in front of your fellow human beings. And you do not realize that through doing so you make yourselves ridiculous and to fools, disgrace yourselves, and thus reveal your effective lack of intelligence and your unintellect. It does not come to your mind to explain the simplicity of a thing as simply as it is, using simple words, and that all your fellow human beings, even those who are academically not highly educated, understand everything exactly. And truly, that is megalomania through which you clumsily splash around, in the matter of the truth of all truth, as in clear water, and at the same time, through your bumptiousness, you do not realize how you trample dirt and rubbish into everything and make the originally clear water into a muddy sludge, in which nothing is no longer clearly recognizable. 526. Many amongst you human beings of Earth live in a completely wrong learning, and as a result you neglect to fill in your assigned to you place in the creation universal consciousness, as well as in its laws, recommendations, created creations, and in everything existent as a jointly swinging and rightly acting Wesenheit. 527. The creational laws and recommendations are so formed that you shall live according to them and come to your senses through following them, so that you may fulfill your task with regard to your consciousness evolution, and thus give enrichment to your spirit, and through this spirit to the creation itself. But if you do not do this, then you will become rotting fruit, and will putrefy and decompose. 528. Through the effects of the creational laws and recommendations, it always proves what you move rightly in your existence, or what you act upon wrongly, because the effects arise according to how you act. 529. You amongst you human beings of Earth who struggle with things through which no climb up through evolution of the consciousness can take place, you are wasting your time, energy, and power, because you deviate from the motion of the creational swinging waves through which the healthy and necessary harmony is given you, namely because you disturb yourselves in this harmony. 530. Learn, therefore, to recognize in perception the motion of the simplicity of the creational laws and recommendations, and to appreciate and use them in their entire greatness. But if you do not act in this wise, then you will shatter your own activity with regard to your evolution and the finding of the effective real truth of all truth. Because on the way of your development you stand in the way of yourselves, and you flush yourselves away as a pernicious hindrance. 531. Learn that the motion in all things is the most important factor of each development, which is given in the creation universal consciousness, because it itself has as a motion of an idea of the primal creation, arisen from out of itself, as an at all times stirring motion, and is kept in it and constantly renewed. 532. And just as the progress of the motion is in the creation itself, so the progress of the motion must also be in yourselves as well as in your world, for which you must constantly be concerned. 533. You human beings of Earth who have been swinging in the laws and recommendations of the creation which have been given since the primal beginning, you shall not dally away your time by going through life in wrong intellectual and rational rumination. nor shall you destroy the motion of the development that is given through the creational energy and power, through which you, together with the truth-finding and its following, further your consciousness evolution. 534. It is urgent that you finally fathom all conceivable creational laws and recommendations. Learn about them and direct yourselves according to them. Because if you do not use your earthly activity to fathom, to find, and to follow the truth of all truth, and hence reach a high consciousness-based evolutionary fulfillment, then you cannot truly exist in the life. Because it inevitably must break down and bring terrible disadvantage in accordance with the effects of the laws and recommendations of the creation. So the true love, peace, freedom, and harmony, as well as joy and happiness pulverize in you, just like a stepped-on, overripe, and poisonous puffball that wildly spreads its spores and infiltrates its surroundings with them. This happening is entirely factual and simple. But for you human beings of Earth, the effect is of tremendous dreadfulness, because just as the poisonous puffball spreads its poisonous spores, so you create in you and amongst your whole humankind, through your truthfulness and your truth and knowledge, and through your non-following of the creation-given laws and recommendations, hatred, crime, torture, murder and manslaughter, terror, unfreedom, unpeace and disharmony, as well as wars, strife, jealousy, and a felonious overpopulation, through which you destroy the climate and the nature of your world, and call forth all evil and all conceivable Ausartung. 535. Truly, for you human beings of Earth, there remains only one thing to do, namely to fathom the creational laws and recommendations, and to absolutely direct yourselves according to them. And if you find and recognize the truth of all truth, and therewith also the effects of the creation-given laws and recommendations, then follow them. And if you therethrough reach a certain evolutionary height in terms of your consciousness, then bind yourselves to adhering to them through making a continual effort, because otherwise it goes quickly downwards again with you. 536. Consider, each one of you who cannot keep himself or herself on his or her step must leave that step again backwards. Because each of you can only be what and who he or she really is, whereas what he or she was before is of no significance, because through the motion of the time, it has flowed into the past. 537. That which was is gone and is not recallable again for all the future time, because it is a past change and is no longer existent. 538. Only what is has validity and value, as does everything that arises out of what exists, and this applies in all eternity and all great time. 539. Therefore, you human beings of Earth, educate yourselves, and indeed in your present and in your future, in every kind and wise always through your real creational nature, which is given to you, so that you bring your self-created form of the inner nature, your individuality, to bear according to the creational ideal. 540. Truly, without constant motion in every respect of the good and positive, there is no stability for you in your existence. And truly, you cannot bask in the glow of your ancestors, because instead of glow there was blindness amongst them too, just as there is amongst you. Therefore you must first bring everything to glow and polish it up. Thereby each one of you stands for himself or herself, because the wife cannot do anything for her husband, nor can he do anything for her, so the children cannot do anything for their parents, nor the parents for their children, just as no fellow human being can do anything for the other one, because each one of you must do everything in and for himself or herself alone, because each one of you only has his or her present to himself or herself. And that you fall into rumination over this and over yourselves does not bring any benefit for you, because you only have to recognize that everything is anchored in this wise in the effects of the creational laws and recommendations, which corresponds to the strength of the character and of all virtues of the creation universal consciousness, so that each one of you and each life form in general has exactly the same rights and his or her own responsibility to bear, just like everyone else. So you shall not fall in senseless rumination over this, but instead each one of you shall turn to the unchangeable truth as it is pre-given through the creation and its laws and recommendations. 541. Consider, if you spend your days on earth ruminating over yourselves, then you will never be able to climb upwards in the evolution of your consciousness, because you are held back through the senseless rumination. 542. Do not assume that a rumination over yourselves and a pure observation of yourselves is something very special, great, and valuable, because that is not the case at all and does not bring you further in your consciousness evolution. 543. Truly, you have many terms and words for your ruminating over yourselves, but they all mantle the actual sense of the case, namely to get to know yourselves in all your thoughts, feelings, passions, habits, capabilities and possibilities, etc., in order to get to the core of the case, which is given therein that you use all perceptions, cognitions, and cognizances as well as the knowledge, the practical experiences, and the living of them, as well as the wisdom resulting out of it all for. Turning to the truth of all truth, to the creation and its laws and recommendations, which are to be fulfilled, and through which you really learn and advance your evolution of the consciousness. 544. But you are many amongst you, you who do not use your thoughts and feelings in an evolutionary kind and wise, but instead let them deteriorate in senseless rumination. You wrongly ruminate around in remorse and humility, and you try, through rumination, to discover your errors and to find a way to avoid them. But there is no progress in this, because the constant rumination leads to no success and to no end, because the rumination remains a rumination. 545. What you have to do is not a ruminating, but a conscious using of your thoughts and feelings as well as your intellect and your rationality, through which you must search for the way of the truth in yourselves, which is the truth and the culmination point itself, so that through it you find the truth of all truth, which is given in the creation universal consciousness as well as in its laws and recommendations. And only then, if you take this way and give up your constant rumination, will you create in you a state of true love, joy, peace, freedom, and harmony, because this is how it is pre-given through the effects of the laws and recommendations of the creation. 546. So go the right way. However, never go the wrong way of the rumination, which does not lead up to the truth and consciousness evolution, but down into the darkness of the knowledge untruth, not knowing and irresponsibility, because through rumination you bind yourselves to something in which you go around in circles and never find a fulfillment, because you inevitably only look at yourselves in the wise, so that you only perceive those things about yourselves that seem pleasant to you, and this prevents you from striving for and reaching higher fulfillments in terms of the evolution of your consciousness. 547. While ruminating you become morose and lose your laugh, which in its open and honest joy and heartiness is the biggest and strongest enemy of the darkness of your thoughts and feelings. 548. With this, not the laughing in schadenfreude is meant, but the releasing laugh of one's own joy and kindness, as it arises through one's own inner freedom, one's own inner peace, and one's own harmony, because open and evolutionary thoughts and feelings are given which connect themselves with the real truth and the creational laws and recommendations. 549. Whereas open thoughts and feelings connect themselves through the truth in an evolutionary wise with the reality and create in you joy, love, happiness, harmony, peace, freedom, and kindness. The rumination has the opposite effect in that it presses you down, keeps you down, and pulls you further and further down into that darkness in which you live in tribulation and where you create all the terrible things of the Ausartungen, such as hatred, revenge, retaliation, strife, jealousy, war, murder, torture, felonious acts, criminality, ruin, destruction, and elimination. 550. Truly, if you continuously ruminate instead of directing your thoughts and feelings upon the real truth and your evolutionary progress, then you have no conscious volition to really experience and live the truth, because in your rumination, you are only wallowing in vanity, wrong ambition, and in your conceit, in your haughtiness, in your supposed superiority, and in your being presumptuous. 551. Truly, if you give in to your rumination, then this is not a longing for the truth about yourselves as well as with regard to the creation and the effects of its laws and recommendations, but rather it is your own pure pathological craving for overbearingness which creates in you the motivation for your rumination, and indeed in a wise that is reigniting the whole time and again and uncontrolledly continuing it. 552. Your rumination over yourselves is pure self-torment, in which you create and endure over and over again the same thoughts and feelings in a rotating wise, while you observe everything with fervor and even effective fanaticism and are not able to bring the alternating pros and cons under control. 553. All these processes of your rumination get into your psyche both as vexation and as consolation, as a result of which it gets into confusion and via the consciousness brings forth again wrong thoughts and feelings, and you wrongly assume that something has been overcome once more, which is truthfully, however, not so, but only springs from a mood of self-gratification and does not mean that you have advanced or developed one step. 554. The whole corresponds truthfully to a wrong self-ascertainment, because it only ascertains what is thought up as imagination. Therefore, such an ascertainment is nothing more than a self-deception. 555. In reality, through this, not a single step of the progress in cognition with regard to yourselves and with regard to the truth of all truth, as well as the creational laws and recommendations is reached, but only a self-deception. And truthfully, you make this error over and over again, even if you wrongly assume that it is no longer the same error, because usually when an error is resolved, this leads to a progress, since the erroneousness is reduced more and more until it ultimately is resolved. However, the error that you make with regard to the entire connections of your rumination is thus unchanged, always the same, and only changes in its form, although it neither minimizes nor reduces, if you do not give up and free yourselves from your rumination. 556. So if you do not end your rumination, you will never get ahead, even if according to your own wrong observation you assume that you are overcoming one error after the other. Truthfully, in your rumination you always go only in circles around yourselves, while the long-established fundamental problem continuously expands and continues to create new forms. 557. If you always observe only yourselves ruminatively, then you resemble the mythological Hydra, a serpent-like monster with 9 heads which grow back as soon as they have been hacked off, so that the fight never ends and one can never gain victory. 558. Just as the mythological Hydra grows an identical new head, so do your thoughts and feelings of the same kind, if you indulge in the rumination, which is in any case always senseless. However, what you can achieve with your rumination is unreality, because as a rule rumination leads to assuming and visionarily seeing things that are not reconcilable with the clear reality and are thus purest illusions, through which you also regard, in a delusion-based wise, fabulated godheads, 10 gods, angels, saints, and demons as non-core substantial natures, to whom you fall prey in confused and irrational belief. 559. Consider. Only when you joyfully, freely, and consciously strive for the high culmination point of the truth-finding, direct yourselves towards this destination, and thereby do not have your thoughts and feelings constantly directed only upon yourselves, can you advance and reach the high culmination point of the truth recognition and truth following. 560. And consider that you cannot make progress without throwbacks, and that in your search for the truth, and when following it you will keep falling, because making errors is unavoidable when learning, and therefore you must become more and more attentive and heedful during your learning process. But with every throwback and fall you must rise again until you reach the security that keeps you from throwbacks and falls. That is the way which you as human beings must go, and upon which you must not be faint-hearted and must not be wailing and not be complaining, but instead you shall always newly and freshly turn towards the endeavor. And if you do that, then the moment will unexpectedly come when you suffer no more throwbacks and you no longer have to fear them, because you will have amply taken in everything that you have learned, and because you amply follow the creational laws and recommendations. 561. Know, however, you can only take in and follow the things to be learned by really perceiving everything and gaining thereout an effective cognition and the necessary cognizance as well as the knowledge thereout, which you must bring to your practical experience and then live it, out of which you then gain the essence, the true wisdom. 562. The observing alone is not enough, and neither is the ruminating, because this will not lead you to the real and true perception, and hence also not to the developmental process up to the wisdom, because through observing alone, as well as through the senseless ruminating, you put yourselves outside of each truthfully perception, outside of the cognition, cognizance, knowledge, experience, and its living, as well as outside of the wisdom, through the observing alone, as well as through the Senseless ruminating, you take apart and deconstruct everything, because you look at everything as if it was something strange, instead of directing yourselves fully and amply upon everything in a conscious and perceiving wise. 563. And when you look at yourselves in order to see yourselves how you really are, then you must not just simply observe yourselves, but instead you must remain neutral and stand outside of your thoughts and feelings, because only then can you truthfully, consciously perceive yourselves in all things as they really are given in you. 564. If you fall prey to the rumination, then you only serve your intellect, which you use to go around in circles, because through your intellect you hold back the entire developmental process from the real perception to the wisdom, because you leave the rationality out of your attention, which would let you perceive everything. You do not let the effects of all the outer happenings out of the world of the coarse substantial, the material, get into your rationality, but instead you only store everything in your inadequate intellect, which without rationality cannot separate and analyze the truthfully facts, and as a result neither a clear perception, nor cognition, cognizance, and no knowledge, as well as no practical experience, no living experience, and no wisdom can come about. 565. Not only in the intellect, but also in the rationality, all things are called up for the collection, because only together can intellect and rationality hold fast to something effectively and work it out to a result. But you are conceited and take everything apart and cut it into pieces with your inadequate intellect, and consequently it does not reach the rationality through which the possibility is first given that everything is really perceived, taken in, processed, and made into the cognition and cognizance, as well as into the knowledge, and into the practical experience and the living of it, and into the wisdom. 566. No, just as your human consciousness, through its activity, sets everything free in a logical wise from the inside to the outside via the intellect and the rationality, so that it really does reach the outside, and indeed in whatever form, so everything from the outside can also only reach the consciousness again via the way of the intellect and the rationality and be processed by the consciousness as perception, cognition, cognizance, knowledge, practical experience, living experience, and wisdom. 567. The impression of all outward happenings out of the material, i.e., the core substantial, must always reach the consciousness by coming from the outside, via the intellect and the rationality, and indeed irrespective of which one of the sense forms is taking something in. 568. Truly, there is no other way, because if the activity of the consciousness must go the exact same way in the opposite direction, i.e. towards the outside, then this too can only happen via the intellect and the rationality, because only together can intellect and rationality create a logical result. The intellect alone cannot create any result at all without the cooperation of the rationality, because the intellect alone leads in its activity to a rotation, to a rumination, i.e. to a going around in circles. 569. If you are ruminators, you crampfully hold fast to the impressions of the outer happening solely in your intellect, and you take it apart and deconstruct it with your intellect. And in doing so, you do not pass on anything or only a tiny part to your rationality, in which case the thought activity distorts this tiny part with Gewaltsamkeit, which has the consequence that the realness, as it was, loses its reality. 570. This means that the rumination cannot bring about any progress nor any development, i.e. evolution of the consciousness, which can only become real truth and reality through the entire process of the effective and conscious perception, cognition and cognizance, knowledge, experience, and the living of it, and wisdom. 571. Therefore it is recommended to you not to fall prey to the rumination, but instead to fully perceive, take in, process, and live through everything in you, because only therethrough does everything consciously stream into your intellect and in your rationality, and become a conscious and strong factor of the evolution and widen your real capability of understanding things. So also with regard to the creational laws and recommendations, the following of which is of greatest importance for your consciousness-based development and the becoming human in the real and true sense. 572. But truly, under the truth of these things you understand something that is wrong, because you only make demanding wishes to the life, and you do not want to give anything to it in your conceit, through which you are no longer able to form anything in a healthy and correct wise, but only indulge in a belief in an invented God, tin God, and in human beings whom you raise to the status of divinities and worship. 573. In your belief, you hope for the kingdom of your God, or that of a tin god or idolized human being. And even when just thinking about it, a joyful trembling goes through you, because you indeed hope for love, joy, a present, and happiness from your worshipped ones. Because the wrong and irrational teachings that are directed towards them present you the illusion of longing for their supposed help and goodness, and an ability to restfully enjoy. 574. But owing to your deficient state of your intellect and your rationality, the majority of you earthly humankind are unable to comprehend that the wrong prophets and teachers, as well as their priests and other representatives, dupe you, and with regard to the effective truth of all truth, and hence also in respect to the creation and its laws and recommendations, cheat you, and thus subjugate you into absolute belief obedience. 575. Truly, the creational laws and recommendations do not demand of you that you must turn to the effective truth of all truth. They only recommend it. So you yourselves must decide over it and choose the right way. These laws and recommendations also do not demand and recommend that you shall sink into rumination and turn away from the truth, because on the contrary, the recommendations are such that you have to consider everything thoroughly, so that you may turn to the truth of the creation, and its laws and recommendations, and their following. 576. The recommendation of the creation given laws and recommendations is that you consciously, in your own volition, and in your completely free decision, direct yourselves in your determinations, wishes, and expectations totally towards the truth of all truth and the creational laws and recommendations. 577. Only if you follow the truth of all truth, which is pre-given through the creation and its laws and recommendations, will true love, freedom, harmony, and true peace arise in you, because then everything disturbing, impeding, and confusing falls away and is kept away. 578. You alone as human beings bring about everything, namely the good and the evil, the negative and positive, because you alone are responsible for all and everything, whatever you create in terms of thoughts and feelings, as well as in terms of actions, deeds, and all your activity. 579. You alone are the ones that bear the responsibility for the forming of your life conduct, your thinking directions, and determinations. So you yourselves have to make an effort for a right guidance and forming of your existence. 580. You alone bear the responsibility for your behavior in every respect. So you are also responsible for your state of the righteousness and unrighteousness, of the conscientiousness and consciencelessness, of the fairness and unfairness, as well as of the dignity and deference, and of the dignitylessness and deferencelessness. 581. Consider thereby that in every good, progressive, and evolutionary respect, you cannot force anything, and nothing is given to you for free, but that instead you must willingly and consciously work hard for everything yourselves, and truly the work in acquiring all of the good and high values is rich in deprivation, because with regard to the real truth of all truth, what is recommended for the acquiring work is hard and inexorable. 582. But truly, the creating of all the high values of the life and the following of the creational laws and recommendations is also worthwhile, because the reward is true love, freedom, harmony, and peace, as well as virtuousness, conscientiousness, righteousness, fairness, and being fair, and true dignity and deference. 583. Therewith all you human beings of earth opens up the goblet of the truth, the teaching of the truth, the teaching of the Spirit, the teaching of the life, and the teaching of the prophets as a comprehensive prophetic and true teaching book, that it may redound to the prosperousness of your consciousness evolution and to your well-being of life, so that you do not continue to go forth in evolutionary consciousness darkness, and you no longer curse yourselves, but instead go towards the light of the truth of all truth and follow and fulfill the laws and recommendations of the creation universal consciousness. And in this wise you shall do, so that true love, freedom, harmony, and peace may come about in you yourselves and amongst your whole humankind, and that you may free yourselves from your unrighteousness, consciencelessness, irresponsibility, unfairness, hatred, revenge and retaliation, murder, terror, war, and from everything that is unfair, evil, and ausgeartet, which you have imposed upon yourselves as a curse since time immemorial, to the boon and development, not to the bane. The goblet of the truth you have now studied, have removed evil and untruths out of you. For your good, your honor, and for the life, have given the truth its true value, the creational laws their right, shown your way to the peace and joy, and you have also learned a great deal out of this book, and everything to your boon, not to the bane. Semyazi Silver Star Center, 13th of July, 2008. Billy.